want to talk to you about some of the, I guess they were lies we tell ourselves, and also different illustration styles, because there's a lot of artists out there who get, and myself included, you look and you see how amazing somebody is done something and you're like, I will never be able to do that. And it's really dangerous to go down that path of thought, because you start getting depressed about yourself and you start thinking, I'm never going to be successful. So I want to talk about a whole range of illustrators who are all successful, who have a variety of styles. So first I want to show you, this is Trashy the Bear. This is the first book that I wrote and illustrated. And I want to show you some of the progress I made. I mean, this is my first drawing. I'm not sure if that's even on the screen. There we go. My first drawing of the little girl, and then I went back and actually took a picture of my daughter and worked from that. And so you can see there's a massive difference in style change here, and more warmth, and that's just a progression on one book. And then in my next book, Drew Dragons Kiss Their Mommies, which isn't out just yet, I made even more progress with drawing faces and heads and getting expressions. And from that, my next book that I'm working on is Seuss and the Blanket Thieves, and this is what I've drawn for that. You can see I've made a big jump in how to draw my heads, and that is, I mean, these were from me learning on my own and watching YouTube videos and reading on Pinterest and picking up library books. This was from actually taking a class from this woman, Nina Rycroft, and she has an online class. I'll put her links down below, but it's a fantastic class, because it's one thing to learn from a book, but you're not getting any feedback, and sometimes you just need feedback on what you're doing wrong. So I had drawn these, and then Nina had taken it and printed it out, and then she had done an overlay on top of it and shown me where I had too point of a chin, so she told me to drop the chin back and to make a bigger head out the back, and to move the eyes over more, and move the ear back, and adjust the chin. And so that, I went back and redrew everything and adjusted things, and I am so much happier with this now. And so I highly suggest taking a class. If you can't take Nina's class, take somebody else's class. Getting feedback is going to make you improve as an artist even more than watching videos. I am going to talk about Nina's style real quick. She has a very unique way of shading. Let me see here. Making sure the whole book is in. There we go. If you can see these lines in the background that she overlays on top of her images, it gives a sense of depth while also creating a feeling like there's a chaotic, lively scene going on in the background. And just, my daughter loves this Impala. She thinks she's the prettiest Impala. But her style is very whimsical and full of movement, and just very lively and colorful. So if you get a chance, Nina Rycroft, she has a whole bunch of books out. This is Ballroom Bonanza. Sheldon Silverstein is an amazing author. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He not only was an author and illustrator, but he was a country singer too. He had his books translated into 30 languages, 20 million copies, 2 Grammy Awards, Golden Globe and Academy Award nominee. He says, I was also lucky that I didn't have anybody to copy and be impressed by. I had developed my own style. And another quote, I had to pull this up because it was just fantastic. I hope that people, no matter what age, would find something to identify in my books and pick up one and experience a personal sense of discovery. That's great. I think if you're a creative person, you should just go about your business, do your work, and not care about how it's received. I never read reviews because if you believe the good ones, you have to believe the bad ones too. Not that I don't care about success, I do, but only because it lets me do what I want. I've always prepared for success, but that means that I have to be prepared for failure too. I have an ego, I have ideas, and I want to be articulate to communicate, but in my own way. People who say they create only for themselves, but don't care if they're published, I hate to hear talk like that. If it's good, it's too good not to share. And that's the way I feel about my work. So I'll keep on communicating, but in my own way. Lots of things I won't do. Anyway. So that's, but you can see from his drawings, they're very abstract, and he uses a lot of pointillism, and it's very, it's a very unique style, and very simplistic lines, really, when you get right down to it. But kids love it. They think it's just so great, and it's not like anybody else's. I mean, you're never going to find somebody else who draws like Sheldon Silverstein, unless they actively go out there and try and draw like him. But the line work is very, it gives so much character and so much energy to the photos or to the drawings that you really almost don't need the words to go with it. So Sheldon Silverstein, good one. Let's see here. Another kind of abstract author is, I'm going through my notes here, I'm sorry. Is Dr. Seuss. And Dr. Seuss, actually, this is his first book. I think I saw it on Mulberry Street. He shopped this book around to, where is it? I'm sorry, I'm going through my notes. He shopped this around to between 20 and 43 publishers. Their different accounts, but he was rejected a lot for this book. And he actually was going home to burn the manuscript. He'd just completely given up. And he ran into a friend from Dartmouth, and that's how the book got published, was his friend knew somebody and got him in with Vanguard Press. And he now has over 600 million copies printed, over 60 books written, 20 languages, 11 TV specials, 4 films, 4 TV series, and a Broadway musical. And he just has a very unique style. Simplistic, but creative. This isn't even the most creative of his books. This is just his first. But you can see how it's very different from Silverstein, but it's engaging with the children. It's very simple colors, mostly black and white, but he uses primary colors a lot in his books. And I think that gives it much more pop. But he knows where to leave white spaces so that you're not overwhelmed by the pictures. So that's something to think about. So then there's Madeleine by Ludwig Bellamaz. He actually, he wanted to become an artist and painter, and he had a lot of difficulties. He ended up writing this book. He wrote a lot of different books, but he wrote Madeleine, and he wrote 6 of them and illustrated them. I stuck with writers and illustrators because I thought that would be consistent. But you can see it's a very simplistic style. The backgrounds are more intricate, actually, than the girls themselves. And he sticks with a very limited color palette. It's something to consider, and I probably should have brought it up with Sheldon Silverstein. When you're going to sell a book, if you have a very large book, like Where the Sidewalk Ends, and you do color in it, it's going to make it twice as expensive. So a book that would sell for $13 would sell for like 25, 26. And that's going to limit your market. So that's something you need to keep in mind when you're doing illustration. Most children's books are colored, and that's fine. They're a smaller book. But if you're doing anything bigger, it's a good idea to limit your color palette to maybe 1 or 2 colors, maybe, or just do black and white. Another option is to print one version that's in color and one version that's in black and white. And then the people who don't want to spend a whole lot of money, they can get the black and white one. But then later on they'll be like, oh, I really love this book, I gotta get the color version. So then you get to sell 2. So that's something to consider. You can see it's a very simple story. And I mean, the drawings, I especially like this one where he gives a sense of running just by angling her so much. It's not realistic. Nobody runs like that. But at the same time, it gives an impression, and that does a lot for the story. But it's, once again, it's very simplistic. It's very impressionistic. It's stylized. It's not realistic, and that's fine. You know, kids still love this book. My daughter loves this book. Next one is Clifford, Norman Birdwell. And let me find. He was rejected by 15 publishers for his, he wanted to be an illustrator, and 15 publishing houses rejected his illustrations until one day one of them came across a drawing of a little girl and a really huge dog, and the editor went, you know what, that's a cute picture, why don't you write the story behind that picture? And so he wrote the story about Clifford the big red dog, and he went on to write over 40 Clifford books and a TV series, 2 TV series, movies, live musical. It's in 126 million copies in print in 13 languages. You can see how simple the face is. He actually spends more time on Clifford the dog than he does on Emily Elizabeth. And you can see the difference between, let's do the big, Clifford the big dog. There, it's not a lot of difference here. I guess this is one of his first books, and this was later on. But even further on from that, Scholastic, I think, owns the copyright on it, and so they are now drawing and doing stories from Clifford. So there's no, it says based on Norman Birdwell's Clifford series, but they don't have an actual author written on there. But I mean, if you look at how he does the faces, they're still very expressions, you know, have very expressive faces, but the focus is on Clifford, which is where it should be. And how he does his noses are quite funny to me, because it's like a little teardrop for a nose instead of like just a little line. And he makes shaggy lines to give an impression of hair around the dog. And most of the time, to draw Clifford with Emily Elizabeth, she's in a very small stature, simply to show the size of him. But he's very successful, and it's very stylized. It's not, I mean, this is not realistic, and that's fine. You see how much more time he spends on the eyes up here in the shading on Clifford than he does really on the kids. And that's to draw the attention up there, because that's where it should be. Anyway, so that's Clifford. Okay, I'm gonna do Dilbert next. Just because I know he's not an illustrator. I know, I don't care. I love Dilbert. And I bring it up because Scott Adams went through so many different iterations of failure in his life. He was rejected from art school. He ended up going into law and economics. He got an MBA in economics, but he didn't really like work. He ended up drawing these and putting them outside his cubicle, and he shopped it around, but he kept getting rejected and rejected and rejected. And he actually got a letter from a fan that inspired him to keep going, even though he kept getting rejected for Dilbert. And he finally got on into United Media, bought the rights in 1989, and he would draw at 4 a.m. before he went to work. And yeah, it's very simplistic. It's not complicated art by any means, and it's not high art, but you know what, it doesn't matter. It makes people laugh, and that's really the important part, is that people enjoy reading these and it makes them happy. And so it's now by the year 2000, it was in 2,000 different newspapers, 57 countries, and 19 languages. And he finally went full-time in 1996. So from 89 to 96, that's 7 years of working full-time in 2 different jobs, which is gotta be rough. He felt that one of the things that helped him was he included, is it in here? Later on, I think it puts it in. He ended up putting in his email address into the panels so that people could, it must have been later on that he did it, because I don't see it in these. He put his email address in there so that people could write him and let him know what he was doing well and what he wasn't doing well. And so that feedback helped him develop into a better artist and into a better cartoonist. So I mean, it's just sight gags and simplistic, and yeah. Anyway, one of my favorite illustrators is Stephen Kellogg. I love The Mysterious Tadpole. That's my favorite book. There's not a lot out there on him, but he's got over 90 books published, and he does illustrations for other authors, not only his own work, but for other authors as well. But his style is very curved. There's no sharp lines anywhere, except for buildings, but other than that, all the characters are very curved. The eyes, I mean, he must do these drawings at a really high, like, massive scale and shrink them down, because the eyes are really quite detailed. And one of the things about his style is the way he does wrinkles on clothing. You know, there's a lot of highlights about where the clothing folds and where he folds. You know, you can see all these folds. And another thing that he does is most of his books have a color scheme which is blue, green, yellow, orange. There's not a lot of reds, very little in the way of pink or purple. I mean, it might be in there occasionally, but it tends to be the blues and greens and oranges and yellows. And if it does have a red, it's an orange red. That covers most of your landscapes, and it gives kind of a glow to the pictures, and you don't really notice it until all of a sudden you can't stop noticing it. But so he's who I aspire to, and who I've tried to not copy his style, but I'm taking a lot of inspiration from his works. I'm certainly never going to draw like him, but the idea of putting whimsy and movement, there's always so much movement going on. I mean, this could be a very static scene, but you have this movement going on, and there's very few scenes that don't have a lot of movement. And a lot of times you find pictures where they're actively like jumping in the middle of the picture, you know. So these are just some of the things that, I mean, this is falling, and it gives such a sense of a pause in time. So don't beat yourself up. Think about all the things that you can do to improve yourself, and remember, it's about your own journey and to find your own style. And there's nothing wrong with anyone's style. You know, there's so much personal opinion, and it's so long as you're getting joy and laughter and putting emotions into your characters to further the story, then it really doesn't make sense to compare yourself to somebody else. It's best to just say, hey, this is where I am. This is where I've moved to. I mean, like I said, my own personal journey from this to this, that's a year of hard work. Actually, it's more like 2 years of me busting and redrawing and redrawing and redrawing, taking classes and watching YouTube and picking up library books. And it takes time, but be patient and love yourself during this. You know, don't beat yourself up too much about it. It's just a progress, and you have to go through it. I'm sorry, but you have to go through it, and it's painful sometimes. But love yourself, take care, have a good day. Bye.